It's the greatest mystery in literary history. A divisive question with highly contested answers. Who was the writer behind the pen name William Shakespeare? Welcome to Don't Quill the Messenger. Here's your host, Stephen Sable.
Welcome back, fellow Quillers, to this very important and long-awaited episode of Don't Quill the Messenger. It is the third installment from our friend and guest all the way from Portugal. You know him from his previous episodes with us. His name is Luis Sousa. He is, of course, a world-renowned engineer and also a very avid musician, composer, master pianist, and he is one of my favorite guests because, as you have heard me say many, many times, I don't believe that anyone can truly solve this mystery without being fluent in all of the languages that the author was obviously fluent in, and Luis, of course, is fluent in multiple languages. And so he thinks like Shakespeare. He thinks in multiple languages. He can decipher and tear apart the language, the text, in ways that most of our other guests have never been able to do. We're so lucky to have him here. And today he's going to help us solve the mystery and give us some information behind the actual creation of the name William Shake Speare. Luis, welcome back to Don't Quill the Messenger.
Hello, Stephen. Thank you very much for those very kind words. I'm delighted to be back. It's always a pleasure. Greetings to the listeners too, and welcome to today's masterclass.
I think that's a great way to describe it, Luis. And, you know, one of the things, and not to belabor the point, but as I mentioned, you know, you have such a unique perspective about this topic, not only the multiple languages that you speak, you know, you understand how the author created words by combining languages together. Also, your engineering background, you have such a mathematical and scientific approach to the way you view things. But then when you translate that also into your musicality, and obviously our author was in love with music. It's very prominent throughout the canon. And I think that all of that combined gives you this really unique perspective that no other guest I've had and no other scholar I've ever met has that same type of ability to look at the text of Shakespeare. I mean, you've read these texts in multiple languages, different translations, which is something that I don't know that hardly any Shakespearean scholar can say. And I think that's what sets you above the rest and puts you in a place that is so different from anyone else who has really studied this topic.
Thank you very much again, Stephen. You know, gifts that God gives. And you know, but as the English say, the proof of the pudding is in the tasting. So today we're going to have the third final masterclass where I intend to present the final piece of the jigsaw. That's right, Stephen. I think I got this case pretty much solved. And yeah, I would like to deconstruct the name William Shakespeare. If you and the listeners will just give me a few hours. Now, it's going to be a pretty long episode, but, you know, they've waited 100 years, 400 years. So what's 4 hours of them lot listening to me banging on about Shakespeare?
Well, if we have to split it up into a two-parter, we'll have no problem doing that. And I'm sure the listeners will enjoy all that you have to say. But as you say, let's taste the pudding.
Yes. Okay. I would like to start by saying that I, in fact, deconstructed the name William Shakespeare back in 2021. I had intended to do this episode we're doing today upon the 400-year publication of the first folio back in April 2023. But you know, Stephen, life gets in the way and one is oftentimes too busy to be asked about any of this. But, you know, better late than never. As I told you earlier on, I'm not at all comfortable doing this episode. There's a lot of conflicting emotions, sadness for seeing this go, at the same time, happiness that this is going. I feel uneasy, at the same time relaxed. I feel somehow uneasy about being here, but at the same time, I know that this has to be done. I even feel that deconstructing the name William Shakespeare, I'm just going to come out and say it. What the hell? I don't think it's that difficult. I think it's actually a joke. So this is also an easy matter, although it takes some time to do. But at the same time, I admit it's complex because it has taken quite a long time to do, 100 years. So I know that this is quite ridiculous. It's just totally absurd. As I told you in the first talk we had, I've never attended a single English literature class in my whole life. And I'm about to take care of the largest, biggest English literature problem of all time. And this is really amusing. So there are certainly a lot of conflicting emotions. Even I haven't spoken English for quite a long time. So I hope my accent and dialect is not all over the place. But you know what the hell? I'm just going to open my mouth and see what comes out.
Well, I know this is sort of a little side note, but just for the listeners, I know, you're in Portugal now. We're speaking from, thousands of miles away from each other. But I know that you spend a lot of your time in other countries, including, I know you spend a lot of time in Africa. What languages are you, at home, obviously you speak Portuguese, but in Africa, what language are you speaking? Are you speaking Portuguese when you visit Africa? Well, who are you around mostly when you go visit Africa?
I mostly spend my time in Africa. Europe is not what it was before.
But what language? I like the weather. What language do you speak when you're visiting Africa? Are you like in French Guyana? Like, where are you when you go there?
I'm pretty much in sub-Saharan Africa. I like it there very much. It's very organic. I like the vibe. In terms of languages, it's quite different because there are countries that have certain states that you may have 800 languages there. So usually it can be Portuguese. We can do English. We can do German in the south. Then South Africa also English. But it's basically a mix of languages. But Stephen, coming back to the point, I'm very happy to be here in Portugal for April and May, which is wonderful. Actually, I had planned somehow to travel to England and do this in England as it is a special occasion. But I cannot take the weather. No, it's too cold for me. I'm not going to go there. But I'm very sorry.
I'm going to be there at near the end of April. I'm going to be there for several days for my wife's birthday, and I'm hoping we get at least a little bit of sunshine. But we'll see what happens.
In April, you'll be ever so lucky. Okay, well, I hope you're lucky. But Stephen, if memory serves, I don't think you've ever done an episode exclusively dedicated to deconstructing the name.
No, I have expressed, there are a variety of different theories out there about where the name William Shakespeare comes from. And I happen to believe that it's obviously a brand, that it was created as a brand, as a name to conceal the author. I'm starting to lean towards the idea that it was a name that was created by multiple minds working together. They may have been sitting around a table and said, well, what are we going to call this guy? What are we going to make this brand? And they came up with the name, almost like business owners would get together and say, oh, we're going to start a new business. What should we call it? And I feel like they sort of spitballed the ideas and bounced around different names. And then eventually somebody said, I got it. This is what it's going to be. And they all agreed and said, yes, that's the name we're going to use. I kind of feel like that might be the way it was created. Of course, there are those out there who believe that Shakespeare, that part of it is an homage to Pallas Athena, the goddess of poetry and literature, and her, shaking her spear. There are those who've talked about how Edward de Vere was this champion jouster, and that there are references to him in print about him being somebody who shakes his spear of countenance at others, and so they'd make those tie-ins. I'm one who believes that the name William has to do with willies, and the fact that poets were referred to as willies because Orpheus brought a willow branch with him into Hades, and of course Orpheus, the great poet and musician. So I'm not sure if you combine all that together that you get the answer, but I'm very curious, and I'm sure the listeners are too, to hear your answer and where you believe the name derives from.
Oh yeah, Stephen. Oh gosh, aren't you now though? Yes. Okay. Regarding the multiple ensemble of writers, I actually do not agree with that. I think it was just one man, but it's perfectly natural and acceptable to think like that. I'm not here today to prove Shakespeare as Edward de Vere. I've already done that on the second interview, the second chat we had. Today, I'm here to deconstruct the name William Shakespeare. And regarding Pallas Athena and Willie and the Willies as poets, especially as mentioned by the fairy queen of Spenser. I understand, but once I start deconstructing the name, you'll see how all this falls apart, both the Willies and Pallas Athena. Because that's the problem with these people that have been going about for the last 100 years, and especially recently, they're getting more and more insane in the brain. Because, if only these self-styled experts in Shakespeare, and Oxfordians even, some of them, if only they would be as good as their promises. But Stephen, what happens with them lot is that they talk the talk, but when it comes down to it, they cannot deliver the goods. So when I'm deconstructing the name today, this is going to require a lot of precision, a lot of focus, and emotional restraint, because I'm not taking one or two plays as we've done in the past, but rather the entire canon, the whole bally lot of it. So I would say that it also, special thanks to you, for it gives me the utmost pleasure to be doing this here on this platform, due to its independent, free, universal, and uncensored nature. And
thank you for that. I appreciate that, Luis, because I have received a lot of flack and a lot of attacks over the years, and I always find it highly insulting when the high priests of Oxfordianism try to shut down other views or shut down people who don't believe as they do or don't think as they do, or try to close out those who aren't in their fold or don't attend their little club meetings. And so thank you for mentioning that. I appreciate that.
Oh, my pleasure, Stephen. As I said before, I think it's wonderful. You've been doing this for a lot of years. You have quite a lot of episodes. It takes an extraordinary commitment and time and effort to do this, and it's really remarkable what you've been doing. I created the expression "the high priests of Oxfordianism." Thank you for reminding me of that. Even before I came on the first interview, but we're going to talk a little bit about these fellows, and maybe I can also clarify and enlighten the public about certain Shakespearean topics that I think should be clarified. But now, Stephen, here is my dedication. So I am dedicating this episode to music and to musicians. Lads and lasses, the love I have for you is without end. I could not have done what I'm doing today without you. And I would like to take today's quote from one of my heroes, Puccini, and from the opera Turandot. The quote is in Italian: No, principessa altera, ti voglio tutta ardente d'amore. Tre nimi m'hai proposto e tre ne sciolsi. Uno soltanto a te ne proporrò. Il mio nome non sai, dimmi il mio nome. Dimmi il mio nome prima dell'alba, e all'alba morirò, which I translate, no, no, cruel princess, I want you burning with love. 3 riddles have you given me, and 3 have I solved. To you I will ask only one. My name you do not know. Just tell me my name. Tell me my name before dawn, and at dawn I shall die. And Stephen, I would not be quoting from Turandot lightly. And as we shall see, this quote will fit the subject matter like a glove. So before we go into a few side matters, I would like to give the usual parental guidance here. We can take it as read. Today, there's not going to be any prisoners. To ground my thesis, I will need to step into the vernacular and some very colorful language, which is totally understandable in this case. And we're going to have some good old honest Stefan and Jeffin. So you've all been forewarned. And also, I'm actually going to play this for laughs because this subject deserves to be laughed at. And if I know that emotions will be running quite high during this episode, so perhaps a health warning would not be amiss here. So do your due diligence. So as I said,
I'm going to pour myself a
Stephen,
glass of wine. I think I'm ready for that now.
Oh, yeah. Are you now? Let's see. Okay. First, there's a couple of sidetrack matters before we go into the name that I would like to address. And as I told you, Stephen, even before I came on to your show the first time, I'm only an Oxfordian to the extent that I agree with the general final proposition. That is, Shakespeare was the Vere. But I do not agree with 90% of everything that has ever been written or said on the subject. I do actually quite like the work of independent Oxfordians and the work of all your many guests that have come onto this show since you've gotten your cherished independence. But when it comes to these organized Oxfordians, Stephen, honestly, I think from what I see from them, I haven't been taking notice of their productions since we did our first show back in 2022. But for the most part, I think they are a bunch of self-important, mad, sad, bad, daft wallies. This is my honest feeling. And, as a case in point of all this tomfoolery that has been going about, that wants to pass as genuine scholarship, I would like us to just take a trip down memory lane and go back to our first episode and the jinxed Scottish play and talk a little bit about the 3 witches. So by talking about these 3 witches, I would like to achieve 2 or 3 goals, which is identify them, identify who the witches are. I would like to give the public a broader understanding of Shakespeare's mind. And I would like also to prove that certain people, perhaps it would not be amiss for them to study a little bit more or to go and do something altogether different. And of course, by putting the cat among the pigeons, I will demonstrate how lightweight these organized Orthodox Oxfordians are. Well, organized Orthodox Oxfordians. Whoa. So they're basically 000s, really, not 007, 000s. And here, Stephen, this round, I'm just giving as good as I got. I'm attacked, I lash out as well, which is perfectly normal. So, because Stephen, contrary to what people think, now coming to the witches, Shakespeare always gives the reader everything he needs. And in these 3 witches, it's no exception. So if you just consider a few unambiguous references taken from the text, it's very easy to understand who the witches are designed to represent. So you see, the first reference, you have hover through the fog and filthy air, or whither are they vanished into the air, and what seemed corporal melted as breath into the wind. Now, with this, it means that the 3 witches can fly. That is, they have wings. I mean, this is normal. Hover through the fog and filthy air. You need wings to fly. Then the next reference. You should be women, and yet your beards forbid me to interpret that you are so. That is, they have beards. Very straightforward. Right, Stephen?
Yes. That's
Then,
often a line that is cut from production because you don't generally have witches that have beards.
Don't you now? Let's see. Then the next reference is round about the cauldron go, which introduces the image of a cauldron, the symbolism of a cauldron. Finally, Stephen, they are three. They are sisters, and therefore women. Well, naturally. So, Stephen, to any qualified mind and that has read the classics and has a basic understanding of the classics, these references should more than suffice to identify the witches. So they are not the fates, as some idiots with heads full of mints would have you believe. They are not the Parcae. They are not the Norns or the Sibyls, oracles, prophets, not even the three tooth fairies. That is absolutely crackers, because it's not a match with the reference Shakespeare provides. Because I follow Shakespeare. I don't follow madness. So these three weird sisters, Stephen, with the wings, with the beards, and with the cauldrons, they can only be three characters in mythology, which are, of course, the three Gorgons. And the three Gorgons are Steno, Ephriali, and Meditha. Okay, I'll say it in Latin instead, because I said it in Greek. So it's Steno, Euriale, and Medusa. For in Greek mythology, they are represented as three bearded women with wings. This is a 100% match. Now, as for the cauldron, this is a reference to ancient Greek and Roman customs of engraving the figure of the three Gorgons on cauldrons to ward off evil and any potential poisoners. So, as I frequently mentioned in our first episode, we have another Shakespeare reference to eyes and seeing in this Macbeth play. For in mythology, whoever saw the ugly Gorgons was turned to stone, so obnoxious were the bearded lasses. And especially important is Medusa and how eyes that would look on her would be turned into stone. Additionally, the Gorgons were servants of Mars. And when they first appear in the play, in the form of the witches, they do so in the battlefield, the field of Mars. Further, the Gorgons are even referred to in the classics as weird sisters. So this myth of the Gorgons is very well known to us Latins because this myth surrounds us everywhere we go. The Gorgons with beards and wings. I especially recommend looking at these vases were from Greece, or Etruscan, maybe Etruscan. The Etruscan vases, they will show you definitely pictures of the Gorgons. And, I think this is another mystery solved concerning the Gorgons and the three weird sisters. And, Stephen, if these 000s were any good at research and were to mind their own business and were not totally Brahms and Liszt, they would have figured this out a long time ago. And they would have saved the public, time, toil, and trouble. But, I suppose it takes all sorts to make a world, even morons. I don't know what they have discovered, honestly. I really don't know. That De Vere preferred to write with a goose feather, that De Vere's desk was oak, that his horse was gray, that his house was off-white. Who cares about this trash? No one cares about this damn thing, Stephen. So...
Well, it certainly proves that he could read Greek, doesn't it?
I would say that this proves, and it's very interesting that you say this, because otherwise I would have forgotten it, Stephen. It's very interesting. It proves that whoever wrote the plays would have to travel to the continent and to have seen the vases, or the cauldrons. This is certain. And the grainman from Stratford never left England. The person would have to see this. De Vere would have been able to see it either in Italy, in France, he could have seen it as well, but mostly Italy. Italy for sure. Germany, probably not so much. And yeah, it's pretty interesting. These plays are really complex, and one needs to be rooted in the classics and languages to understand what this man is doing. And believe you me, Shakespeare is extremely fast. His mind is absolutely astonishing. And to think that people with more teeth than brain cells can actually figure out and deconstruct Shakespeare, no harm in trying. But when you're talking nonsense, I think they should keep it to themselves. This now brings us to another topic. We've talked about the three witches. Stephen, now I would like to talk about the three lions. That is England and the English. Stephen, England, fish and chips, cup of tea, moaning about the weather, pint of bitter, wind and rain, driving on the wrong side of the road, the usual stuff, being rubbish at football, pims and cucumber sandwiches at Wimbledon, and of course the country where they believe a great man wrote Shakespeare. Naturally, as your listeners from England can perceive, I spent quite a long time in England. I have very fond memories of England, and this brings us to the national due diligence. The English didn't do their national due diligence here. There were circumstances. It's actually very unfortunate because every country should be responsible for the diligence in what their illustrious sons and daughters are concerned. And there's no other country with a problem like this in Europe. Portugal, we don't have this problem. Our national poet is Luis Vaz de Camões. He lived 50 years before De Vere. We even have his portrait from life. Spain, Italy, Greece, all done their homework and get full marks. France, Austria, Russia, all good there. It's only in England. And I'm really not having a go, but it's cloud cuckoo land in what her greatest son is concerned. The English are not insane in the brain. The chaps are quick enough, they're clever. The lasses are very witty and charming, a bit on the blonde side, but still extremely cute. They have a remarkable sense of humor. They are pragmatic, and they possess an extremely good common sense. Especially the one up north, calling the custom of calling a spade a bloody shovel. And it's ironic that with all this common sense, they still manage to make a complete pig's breakfast where their illustrious countryman is concerned. And I suppose we're going to all laugh at this one day. But Stephen, now I think it's time that we go on to the name proper.
Okay, let's do it.
Let's do it. Let me get my notes.
Andiamo. Okay. Let's go.
Certo. Okay, Stephen, to be perfectly honest, I've never had that much interest in this name issue. This is not my kind of research. I like deconstructing works.
But don't you think? But don't you think it's important? No, because especially when we say, as far as a pseudonym goes, and when we look at the pseudonyms of history, everyone always, of course, points to the famous American writer Samuel Clemens choosing the pseudonym Mark Twain. I mean, he's obviously a humorist. He is making a joke there. He's being clever. He's being witty. He's being funny, all at the same time. Also, it's easy to remember. And so, there are plenty of other pseudonyms we could point to, including, the Roman writers of old, right? We have several of those, like Terence, for instance. Moliere is a pseudonym. We have so many different important pseudonyms that have sort of these connotations to them or symbolism to them. And I think it's important to figure out why this name was chosen. And I think once we figure out why it was chosen, then we can understand how the mistake was made to identify it as this guy from Stratford, or whether or not that was purposefully committed by Ben Jonson and others, right?
No, it was actually It was actually done by De Vere himself, as I will explain throughout this episode. Then, let me see. You said something extremely interesting. Okay, you were talking about Mark Twain. Yes, okay, I remember now. So in terms of pseudonyms, I think it's only unfortunate that Shakespeare didn't choose the name that God Mozart gave himself when he visited Herr Stein. He was a manufacturer of pianos, the Steinway.
Yes.
The current today, wonderful pieces of machinery. And when Mozart went to visit him, he wanted to play a trick because he hadn't seen Herr Stein for quite some time. So instead of calling himself Mozart, he inverted his name and he called himself Herr Trazom. But when Herr Stein listened to Mozart play, immediately he said, "What Herr Trazom? You're Herr Mozart." So I wish Shakespeare would have done something like this, because this is a lot more complex than the Herr Trazom. But Stephen, it's just two names. Honestly, what can one do with two names? It's really complex. If these idiots are going, and I use the word consciously and intentionally, because these are, it's not right. They attack me. Why would they attack me? It's not proper. It's not gentlemanly. This is not how we do things in scholarship. And when one is publicly attacked, it's only normal that you are also going to defend himself and fight fire with fire, because we cannot let the bastards grind us down, Stephen. So it's just two names. This is not my type of research. Of course, I had looked at it in the beginning when I started deconstructing the plays, but it's really not my cup of tea. I had done the deconstruction of the plays. I had just finished Macbeth, but still there was this question going round and around my head like a trapped parrot, which is, okay, play's done. What about the name? Yeah, not really interested, but let's see what is possible to do. I didn't want to spend any more time or money investigating this. So I just said, okay, let it go. If my subconscious in some way, as it usually does, works it out, I'll put the effort there to deconstruct. And that's what I've done 3.5 years ago. And that's why we're here now. And I knew that there was a meaning behind the name, because Shakespeare is always extremely methodical. And he never does anything arbitrarily. And after going through the entire canon, Stephen, I perceived a very interesting pattern, a pattern that literally jumps at you. It has never been noticed before. How could it? Considering the people that are I think they are leading this movement or this school of thought. There is this pattern which pretty much justifies the name. And it's certainly not Athena. It's certainly not Willie. I'm not even going to waste much time with that, because as soon as I present my solution, I believe that all these will fall of their own accord. So I could do this starting anywhere, but I've chosen to start with the sonnets. Then we're going to look at the poems. We're going to look at few of the plays, and we don't have time to do it all, not even in any detail. And then finally, we're going to go to the sonnets. Then we're going to go to the first folio. I have shared with you the facsimile first edition of all these works. Mm-hmm. I would recommend the listeners to have them in front of them. It's not mandatory, because we'll be describing them anyway. But in whatever way you choose to examine it, Stephen, decoding the name William Shakespeare is reverse engineering, right? And when it comes down to reverse engineering, the guys or dolls that should be undertaking to reverse engineering things are actual engineers. So today, instead of having the usual suspects pretending to be engineers and watching reverse engineering of the name William Shakespeare, we have an actual engineer, myself, Dr. Luis Sousa, commander on the bridge. By royal appointment, today's professor in charge of pointing out the bloody obvious. Okay, we'll start with the sonnets. The sonnet, Stephen, this is where, you know this very well, this is where Shakespeare is at his most personal. He speaks in the first person, I this or I that. And this is a very personal window into the author's mind. And here, just as everywhere else, he's being truthful. And as he says in Sonnet 76, would you please read it out, Stephen?
I can.
Sonnet 76.
I can indeed. Why is my verse so barren of new pride, so far from variation or quick change? Why with the time do I not glance aside to new-found methods and to compounds strange? Why write I still all one, ever the same, and keep invention in a noted weed that every word doth almost tell my name, showing their birth and where they did proceed? Oh, no, sweet love, I always write of you and love are still my argument, so all my best is dressing old words new, spending again what is already spent. For the sun is daily new and old, so is my love still telling what is told.
Absolutely beautiful, Steve. I'm feeling a little bit jealous. Okay, well, here is Shakespeare's challenge in a nutshell. Okay, I cannot read it as well as you do, but the challenge is, why write I still all one, ever the same, and keep invention in a noted we, that every word doth almost tell my name, showing their birth and where they did proceed. Every word doth almost tell my name. Do we believe him? He's certainly very honest in everything he wrote. So I'm going to take him at his word. He's always compressing things, Shakespeare is. And after you want to deconstruct the plays, you get a very good window into how his mind works. And he's telling us here that his real name is a problem, is a secret. Also, he says that he has often mentioned it and what this name is. I mean, this is obvious to any healthy understanding. And I'm sorry to disappoint everyone right now, but William Shakespeare, the meaning can never be Edward de Vere. Let's get that out in the open right now. That would be very un-Shakespeare-like. He's very much better. He's infinitely better than that. For William Shakespeare is de Vere's alter ego. His far greater artistic persona. As he says in Sonnet 72, after my death, dear love, forget me quite, as well as my name be buried where my body is, and live no more, to shame nor me nor you, meaning that the author was not at all keen to have his real birth name out in the open. But this is actually pretty strange when you consider how is this possible? Shakespeare's name is on the bloody title page in broad letters, Shakespeare's sonnets. So what on earth does he mean with my name be buried where my body is, if the name Shakespeare is on the title page? Of course, this means that we are dealing with an author hiding behind a pseudonym. And the next question is, why did the author, whoever he was, chose the name William Shakespeare? And this is what we are about. The challenge is every word does almost tell my name. And we're looking for a word. We're looking for a specific word. I find it a little bit strange and awkward that in 100 years, with so much money and time, millions of hours, millions of dollars, so many people involved in this, and no one has been able to identify the word. Okay, today I'm fairly certain I'll be able to present you the word. So now we're going to start with the poems. We start with Venus and Adonis. This is the first ever publication bearing the name William Shakespeare, specifically in the dedication. This is how all started. So, Stephen, you and the listeners, you have in front of you the facsimile frontispiece of the Venus and Adonis, right?
Yes, and I'll tell the listeners the PDF that Luis has shared with me, I will put up at our Patreon page. So while you're listening to the episode, if you wish to, you can be reviewing the same images that we're looking at. I realize that podcasts are an audio form of entertainment and not visual. However, many of you like to either open up your book, your portfolio, or your book of sonnets, or go and look at the images, which we've done before with previous episodes, and we'll do that again with this episode as well. But yes, I have Venus and Adonis in front of me now.
Okay, that's lovely. So we're going to look at this page, at this front cover, to see if we can detect a pattern. So we're going to start from the top. So above, Stephen, you see an engraving of Juno. There's a couple of satyrs at the top, and you also have a couple of peacocks, as well as a couple of cornucopias. This of course, this image is an elaborate artifice. Why? Because this Juno here in this frontispiece, this is absolutely ridiculous to put her on top of a poem entitled Venus and Adonis. This is absurd. This is preposterous, because this poem has nothing to do with Juno, and she is not mentioned once. I started by saying it's Juno because of the peacocks. The peacocks are the animal of Juno, but it's not Juno. This poem has nothing to do with Juno. Second, as you and the punters know, mythologically, what the Greek divinity decides, another cannot annul. And here we are in the domain of Venus, not Juno. So this Juno figure and the peacocks and the satyrs are all a red herring. Don't forget that Paris gave the apple to Venus and scorned both Juno and Athena. Therefore, no wonder that Venus and Juno despised one another. You know, Venus loved free love, and Juno married life without love. Okay, that could be love, but Juno doesn't really stress herself with that. Venus has always been loved by everyone, and Juno has pretty much been all the time hated or feared by all. Venus always protects everyone, and Juno is your typical self-obsessed married old girl. So consider that face value. This engraving is rather awkward in the work entitled Venus and Adonis, and a hint that something is amiss. But this is a Renaissance device. So I will start by giving you my own interpretation of this picture. The face of Juno is not the face of Juno. This is the face of Venus. And you know, it's because she is smiling. And as you know, Aphrodite, Venus, is known as the goddess that smiles, smiling Aphrodite. Juno never laughs or smiles because she's too strict and she's worried about her husband. Okay. So this engraving is a sign that someone is trying to tell you something more. Now, if you turn your attention now to the front page of the sonnets. Let's get the front page of the sonnets.
Mm-hmm. I have it.
Okay, here we are. Okay, at the top, you have an engraving that is very similar to the one of Venus and Adonis, right?
It is very similar. There is a woman's face in the middle looking almost like a mask that is sort of crowned with flowers. Yes. Instead of peacocks, there are rabbits, but there are also two winged figures, the same as the front of Venus and Adonis. And the winged correct. Fingers are both pointing to the woman in both images.
Okay, that's correct. So let's look at this. So this face of the smiling lass is the same as in Venus and Adonis. And like you said, the satyrs have been replaced with these winged creatures are a Cupid and Heracles. The peacocks have been replaced with rabbits, which, by the way, I would like to tell you that rabbits are the animals of Venus, just like doves are. Then one also sees the Adonis flowers because they populate so easily and so quickly, right? We always say they mate like rabbits, they multiply like rabbits. Yes, yes.
Mad as a March hare is about running crazy in spring because the rabbits are, fornicating as much as possible, right? When he's mad as a March hare, it's because he's filled with lust and testosterone, right?
Yeah, that's exactly the reason why these are animals of Venus, although also it has to do with in some cases with the grace of the animal itself. But the rabbits are indeed animals of Venus. Then at the edge of this illustration, you have the Adonis flower. And Adonis, as everyone knows, is tied to Venus. Apart from this, in this picture, there are also other Venus elements, like the fishes at the bottom. And what else? The fishes are animal of Venus because Venus was born from the sea. And you have a V pattern. So with this figure is very similar.
It also
to the
almost
one
looks
in
like
Venus.
two birds on either side of her head too, right? Two winged. There are also two other winged. Besides what look like cherubs, there are also two just on either side of her head. Looks like almost like some sort of a bird. Almost like
I'll give you a better scan of this quarto version because this one is not so clear. But let us go back to the frontispiece of Venus and Adonis because we have a lot of ground to cover, really a lot. So we can conclude that this face here in Venus and Adonis with everything that's on the sonnets, this face here in Venus and Adonis with everything I said, this is not Juno. This is actually Venus, but surrounded by peacocks and satyrs. Pay attention to this. Then, next element on this page, you have the title.
Oh, and
the title is
just to be clear, you're the two figures in the Venus and Adonis frontispiece are satyrs, not cherubs.
They are satyrs.
Yeah, because they have horns, they have pointed ears, and they're sort of grotesque looking.
Yes, they're grotesque. They're quite sinewy. What else? They're having fun. So these are definitely satyrs. There's no argument about that. But coming now to the title. So the title of this work is Venus and Adonis. So this is the first Shakespeare publication. So the first word that Shakespeare ever put on a published work is Venus, right, Stephen?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Goddess of love, right? This is fact. Then, of course, then next comes the Latin quote from Shakespeare's literary hero, Ovid, the poet of love. The poet of love. The quote is from Ovid's enchanting work, Amores. Now, Stephen, the word we have in Italian, Spanish, Portuguese, and Latin for love is amor. So Shakespeare chose a quote from Ovid, the poet of love, and he also chose to quote from the work whose title, okay. So you can see that a pattern is starting
I'll let
to
you
appear.
read the Latin because you're going to be better at the Latin than me.
Stephen, today, okay, I can read it, but it's very difficult to be changing languages like this. My English is not so good. I'm quite rusty, but I can read it. Okay. Vilia mi retur vulgos mihi flavos Apollo, pocula castalia plena ministret aqua. And here I'm using the correct pronunciation, which is the Portuguese. There's a lot of debate about this. The Portuguese language is actually very similar to the Latin. Latin should not be read in the Italian accent. That would be quite strange. The Romans were very different people from the Italians today. Very, very different. We Portuguese, especially in what language is concerned, are quite conservative. So we stuck to our Latin. That's why our language is so complex. The translation of this is, okay, let the base mob admire base things. To me, golden Apollo served full cups from the Castalian fount or Castalian spring. Then comes the anchor. I cannot read. I can't see anything relevant for my case. This anchor is just the mark of the printer. And of course, at the bottom comes the printer's name and address. So to go back and
but there are words anchoraspel. Spei? Is that an I?
Ancora spei.
Yeah.
This is the mark. this is the mark of the printer. So at the top, Stephen, you have Venus, goddess of love. You have Venus and Adonis. The first word ever written by Shakespeare is Venus, the goddess of love. Then you have the quote from Ovid, the poet of love, from a work entitled The Loves. Then next page, Venus and Adonis. What you have is another illustration, which is two ways bound together. You know, these two ways are patterns that appear throughout Europe. And, you know, no one really knows what they mean. But in this case, they are bound together, which usually these two A's are not. And that's quite interesting. And on kissing the A's, let's say kissing, are two shell-like creatures. Now, one of the symbols of Venus is the seashell. And, you know, I put it to you, Stephen, that these two ways are simply a reference to amore, love. Then you have the dedication to Southampton, which is an expression of filial love of a father for his son. And you have the author's name, which will deconstruct a lot. It's going to take some time to get there, but we'll get there eventually. And this poem, Venus and Adonis, ends with Venus tired of the world and leaving everything behind, intending to immure herself, not to be seen. Something that is very reminiscent of De Vere. Okay, this
Thus
is
weary
Venus
of
and
the
Adonis.
world away she hies and yokes her filular doves by whole swift aid, their mistral mounted through the empty skies. In her light chariot quickly is conveyed. Sorry, I'm reading it from the original print, and the U's and the V's and the F's and the S already screw me up.
You know, let me do it. So, thus weary of the world, away she hies, and yokes her silver doves, by whose swift side her mistress mounted through the empty skies, in her light chariot quickly is conveyed, holding their course to Paphos, where their queen means to immure herself and not be seen. This is how the poem ends. Very beautiful work. But you know, we've done Venus and Adonis, a pattern. We've seen this pattern in Venus and Adonis. Now we move on to Rape of Lucrece, the first page of Rape of Lucrece. It's here. So
it's the exact same image. It's the exact same top header image.
Isn't it though? So again, you have the last Venus at the top. And this is the second work officially bearing the name William Shakespeare. And again, Venus. Now, and why is this not Juno in Venus and Adonis, neither in Lucrece? You know, Juno would never have anything to do with the contents of Rape of Lucrece, because this is the domain of Venus. You know, Venus can have two sides. Very positive side.
Not only that, but Juno's husband is like, you know, the most notorious rapist in all the world. So I don't know that she'd be smiling over a story of rape.
Yes, so that's why it is Venus. You know, Venus herself, as I say, is the smiling Aphrodite. Mm-hmm. And you know, apart in this of Rape of Lucrece is just this illustration here at the front. But then when you turn the page and you read the dedication to Southampton, you know, Stephen, this is actually pretty good. It was so good that I even quoted it on my dedication. So, you know, has any man or woman in the whole history of the world ever received lines more beautiful and polished than these? I mean, Stephen, this is actually quite an impressive expression of love, beginning with the love. And you see behind the T, there is a heart, and which is called a court d'amour, a symbol of love. Mm-hmm. And the dedication, the best bits is the love I dedicate to your lordship is without end, etc. Mm-hmm. What I have done is yours. What I have to do is yours. Being swiftly onto the canon. And it was the canon that I was mostly focused on. Now, how I solved this it's actually a very complex process. I don't want really to go into that because it's really personal, Stephen. It involves meditation, the final stages of meditation. It involves music. It involves musical perfect pitch, and it involves a very high degree of synesthesia. And what I saw in the canon, in doing this process, was that there is one sound that is extremely interesting. And this constantly pops up, this sound, which is the sound love. I don't know of any author that makes such extensive use of this word. It's not even Ovid himself. So this word love, Stephen, appears in the canon no less than 3,204 times. This is really, really interesting. In the sonnets, of course, the word love appears more than in any other work. It appears 239 times, 239 times. Afterward, next, Two Gentlemen of Verona, 207. Next, Midsummer Night's Dream, 170. As You Like It, 169. Even a short poem like Phoenix and the Turtle, 7 times. Venus and Adonis, 88 times. Lucrece, 26 times. Even gory works such as King Lear and Titus Andronicus have it 74 and 44 times, respectively. Hamlet, 85 times. Love's Labour's Lost, 139 times. These are all very interesting metrics. Then in terms of titles of the works, which divinity is mentioned the most? Or the only divinity that is mentioned is Venus. You have Venus and Adonis. You have A Lover's Complaint, and of course, Love's Labour's Lost. By the way, the etymology of Venus is actually love. So that's why you have 3 titles with Venus. And why is it, Stephen, that there's always this question around that no one understands why the Love's Labour's Lost, the title is, is misspelled in the first quarto edition, and then on the plays, it appears misspelled. We're talking about the greatest writer in the English language. I think he's the greatest writer ever. In the catalog of the plays, of the first folio, he has Love's Labour Lost, but Love's is misspelled. There should be an apostrophe there. It's not there. In the quarto, the apostrophe is not there. Why? This is just to draw attention to the word loves. And this is a stratagem, and it is intentionally misspelled. Now, we're going to address the number of gods that are mentioned in the canon. And
also, in the catalog, in the folio of Love's Labour's Lost, lost is not capitalized. It is inconsistent with all of the other titles of the plays, and it is not lost. The word lost is not capitalized.
It's true, Stephen, but he's drawing the attention to loves. But there's a lot of things that we could talk about this catalog of plays, but today we're only focused on the name of William Shakespeare. Mm-hmm. For example, just to tell you something that may be of interest to someone, we're sidetracking a little bit. Let me see, where is it? Okay. So, for example, you have here in this catalog, every time that Shakespeare has a play with the name of a king, he gives it the title king. So you have King John. You have Life and Death of Richard II. But I think, it's because but the title of the play is King Richard II. Then you have King Henry IV, King Henry V, the Sixth, Richard III. This is Richard II. Doesn't have the king, but it's because of space. But the original on the quarto has king. Then you have King Henry VIII. But when it comes to Macbeth, Macbeth is also a king. Shakespeare didn't give him the king. You have King Lear as well. You have Cymbeline with king as well. It's only poor Macbeth. But this is because of reasons I've explained in the first episode. But this was just a sidetrack. It's not really at all important for the thesis today. So when you look at the canon and you look at the number of times the gods are mentioned, it is also a very worthwhile investigation, which is For example, you have Jove, you have Jupiter, you have Zeus, you have Athena, Juno, etc., so on and so forth. Now, Jove or Jupiter also can be used as an oath or a swear word, just like the Brits do today with,
By
current
Jove, I
expressions
think
like,
you've got it.
yes, by Jove, by God, by Zeus. Today in slang we would say "call blimey" or "gosh" or "Gordon Bennett" or "Struth," Jesus Christ Almighty, Jesus, Mary and Joseph, Christ on a bike, Jesus H. Christ. You know what I'm talking about.
God's wounds.
Jesus. Zeus.
Zooms.
Jesus Christ Almighty. I like that one. Jesus Christ Almighty. Okay. So Jupiter, Stephen, Jupiter appears 127 times, but of course you have to take into consideration the raillery. 127 times. Juno, 24 times. Mercury, 15. Mars, 19. Apollo or Phoebus, 44. Then you have Venus or Cytherea, you have 40 times, and Cupid, 53 times. But they are mentioned also indirectly through other terms many more times, like Queen, Beauty, Desire, etc. Now, Cytherea, Venus, Cupid, Aphrodite, and love in Shakespeare are all convertible concepts. As I said, the etymology of Venus is love. Then you see the great heroine of the 000s, Pallas Athena, Stephen. I mean, surely the man that they claim is Pallas Athena's spear shaking is also going to have dozens of mentions in the canon, right? Wrong. Pallas Athena or Minerva is mentioned 5 times. She's the worst scorer in the canon of the Synod of the Gods. I bet this blew your socks off, Stephen. Jesus Christ Almighty.
I try not to invoke Christ or God as much as possible, especially with my children around. But whenever I slip, I always say, Jesus Christ in heaven. He's in heaven and he's looking down on us. But you know what I never say? I'll tell you, Luis. I'll tell you, Luis, what I never say is Pallas Minerva. Or by Athena's wings. I never say that. You're right. I never say that.
Stephen, being a construction man, they think that if one speaks English and happens to be a project director, one is going to go all Captain British England. But nah. There's a lot of swearing involved because that's the only way you can make yourself understood. Because otherwise the people in the field have to process too much information and they're not capable. It gives them some time to process the information at leisure. So you insert quite a few swear words there. So, Stephen, to continue on this our theme, I'm not going to make any hippie speeches or advance any, I'm not going to advance any new age shoe shine, but we have to have a holistic view of Shakespeare's plays. And what are the plays of Shakespeare really all about? Stephen, they're about love in one form or another. You have sexual love, you have sexual love between men, women, you have filial love, sons and daughters, fathers and mothers, you have lust, power, glory, friendship, obsessive love, or self-love. These are all elements of love, and hardly can anyone dispute this. And that is why Shakespeare says, why I write, I still all one, ever the same. That is, I only speak of love. And of course, you need to bear in mind that throughout Shakespeare's life, he was known just as Ovid as the poet of love because of Venus and Adonis. This is how Shakespeare was known during his lifetime, and people forget this. That's why, even though I don't agree with the division the Greeks made of the concept of love, still it is worth mentioning these 8 types of Greek love that De Vere certainly knew. So we're talking about agape, we're talking about eros, we're talking about philia, we're talking about storge, we're talking about mania, ludos, pragma, and philautia. These are all types of love, from romantic love, familial love, self-love, playful love, love beyond life and death. And you have to understand what is the catalyst in every single Shakespeare play is love. Two Gentlemen of Verona, Valentine gets in trouble because of his love for Sylvia. Proteus forgets Julia. Proteus forgets family affairs for Julia. Then he forgets Julia for Sylvia, betraying Valentine. In Measure for Measure, all was going well with Angelo till he saw Isabella. In Love's Labels Lost, the four would-be scholars end up doing no study at all because of the arrival of the four lasses. In Taming of the Shrew, same thing. Lucentio, intending to study, he has a gander at Bianca, and he never sees the inside of the school. So that's a good lesson. Not a good lesson. That's a very bad lesson for young people out there. In the history plays, the arrival of the love element, generally love of man for woman, puts always everything in disarray. So in Henry VIII, the arrival of Anne Boleyn. In Henry VI, the arrival of Margaret and Joan of Arc changed the entire course of events. In Henry V, the marriage to Catherine puts an end to the war, so on and so forth. Then the tragedies, ditto. You have Othello, Romeo and Juliet. I mean, I need not say anything more. Then you also have Antony and Cleopatra, which is a study of desperate, passionate love, of the lead roles that destroys both them and their empires. Then there's also this very interesting, I would say it's a psychological, philosophical, I will work this out better. It's not important the name I'm going to give this, but it is the way that Shakespeare anthropomorphizes love. That is, he personifies a character in the play as love. And this is not so common as you might think. We have in Shakespeare, I'm going to quote a few examples. So we have from Much Ado, the prince and monsieur love. I will hide me in the harbor. From Hamlet, nature is fine in love and what is fine, it sends some precious instance of itself after the thing it loves. Two gentlemen, 'tis love you cavil at, I'm not love. Love is your master, for he masters you. Troilus, with him the mortal Venus, the heart blood of beauty loves invisible soul. Merchant of Venice, Bassanio, Lord Love, if thy will it be. All's well, make choice and see, who shuns thy love shuns all his love in me. Antony and Cleopatra, but stirred by Cleopatra, now for the love of love and her soft hours. As you like it, I'll tarry no longer with you, farewell, good Signor Love. Measure for Measure. Lucio, sir, I know him, and I love him. Duke, love talks with better knowledge, and knowledge with dearer love. Even in King Lear, as he says to Gloucester, I remember thine eyes well enough. Dost thou squinny at me? No, do thy worst, blind Cupid, I'll not love. And you have a dozen others, but the crown goes to the following, which encapsulates the entire Shakespeare authorship mystery. Naturally, of course, from Romeo and Juliet. Quote, 'tis but thy name that is my enemy, thou art thyself, etc. Oh, be some other name. What's in a name? That which we call a rose by any other name would smell as sweet, etc. Romeo, doff thy name, and for that name which is no part of thee, take all myself. Romeo then proceeds to reply with the Vere's voice, I take thee at thy word, call me but love, and I'll be new baptized. Henceforth, I will never be Romeo. Stephen, this is Edward de Vere abandoning his own name and becoming his alter ego, William Shakespeare. Then, concerning love, who wrote most beautifully about everything, but above all else about love? Shakespeare. And it's really sad that people don't know these quotes as well as they should, because these are the most perfect expressions of love to be found in any language. So who does not remember the verses? My bounty is as boundless as the sea, my love as deep. The more I give to thee, the more I have, for both are infinite. Bloody hell. If music be the food of love, play on. The course of true love never runs smooth. The stroke of death is as a lover's pinch which hurts and is desired. Another, whoever loved that love not at first sight. Love is blind and lovers cannot see the pretty follies that themselves commit. I love you with so much of my heart that none is left to protest. This is quite good. For where thou art, there is the world itself, and where thou art not, desolation. And hundreds more like this. Then the longest speech of the entire canon, Stephen, people often think it is the world famous "To Be or Not to Be," but
No,
it's
that's actually a very short speech.
There's longer ones than that, but people think because
there's longer speeches in Hamlet. In fact, the Ghost has a longer speech. There are longer speeches in Hamlet than "To Be or Not to Be." Rogan Peasant Slave is Hamlet's longest speech, and the Ghost speech is the longest speech in the play.
Yeah, but it's very difficult to steal the limelight from himself.
Ironically, in Comedy of Errors, which is Shakespeare's shortest play, we have one of the longest speeches in the canon, and it's Aegeon who is describing how he became separated from his wife and how the twins were separated during the storm at sea. And that's a super long speech.
Yeah, very true. Right at the beginning, a very beautiful speech as well. But the longest speech in the entire canon is Baron's in Love's Labour's Lost.
'Tis more than need.
Act 4. Yes, "'tis more than need. Havoc within affections, men and arms."
We call that the "'tis more than need" speech. And we always joke because we always say, yeah, and he speaks more than is needed.
Stephen, as a side remark, it's not relevant here, but this is actually my favorite soliloquy from Shakespeare, especially when it goes towards the end. Okay, I would recommend the listeners to read this entire speech. I think we should read a little bit of it. Stephen, "For valor is not love Hercules." Could we please have this one here?
"For valor is not love a Hercules, still climbing trees in the Hesperides? Subtle as Sphinx, as sweet and musical as bright Apollo's lute strung with his hair. And when love speaks, the voice of all the gods make heaven drowsy with the harmony. Never durst poet touch a pen to write until his ink were tempered with love's sighs. Oh, then his lines would ravish savage ears and plant in tyrants mild humility. From women's eyes this doctrine I derive. They sparkle till the right Promethean fire. They are the books, the arts, the academes that show, contain, and nourish all the world, else none at all in aught proves excellent. Then fools you were, these women to forswear. Or keeping what is sworn, you will prove fools. For wisdom's sake, a word that all men love, or for love's sake, a word that loves all men, or for men's sake, the author of these women, or women's sake, by whom we men are men. Let us once lose our oaths to find ourselves, or else we lose ourselves to keep our oaths. It is religion to be thus forsworn. For charity itself fulfills the law, and who can sever love from charity?
Yeah, bravo, Stephen. Very good. I really love that. Excellent speech. And it's
beautiful. It's beautiful, especially the part where he says, without women, we cannot be men.
Yeah, this is absolutely great. The cadence, the musicality is absolutely astonishing. The author's full heart was on this. And, for Shakespeare, love is really supreme. Himself and his art are one, and they are both derived from love. Then the author himself has no qualms as to whom he holds to be the highest of gods in that wonderful passage of All's Well, which is from Helena, which is, "Now, Dian, from thy altar do I fly, and to imperial love, that God most high, do my sighs stream." Then in that wonderful Shakespeare play, really ethereal work, absolutely amazing, which is The Merchant of Venice. We again find the same pattern all over again. Portia and Bassanio's wedding scene is really something else. It's exactly what the wedding should be. And it's Shakespeare at his finest. And you see that this pattern again pops up in Portia's speech in Act 3, Scene 2. So if you don't mind again, Stephen, Portia starts with, away then, I am locked in one of them.
Away then, I am locked in one of them. If you do love me, you will find me out. Nerissa and the rest stand aloof. Let music sound while he doth make his choice. Then if he lose, he makes a swan-like end fading in music. That the comparison may stand more proper, my eye shall be the stream and watery deathbed for him. He may win, and what is music then? Then music is even as the flourish when the true subjects bow to a new crowned monarch. Such it is as those dulcet sounds in break of day that creep into the dreaming bridegroom's ear and summon him to marriage. Now he goes, with no less presence, but with much more love.
Yes. Yeah, that's what it's all about. And you know, this verse, if you do love me, you will find me out. If you do love me, you will find me out. This definitely strikes a chord.
Yes, Edward,
Bassanio,
I'm listening. I'm hearing you, Edward. I do love you, and I will find you out.
Yes. So Bassanio is tasked with finding Portia's portrait in the caskets, and the advice that Portia gives him is simple. Let your love for me guide you, and you will find me. Then you have the monumental trial scene, and the famous speech, the quality of mercy is not strained. It droppeth as the gentle rain from heaven upon the place beneath. It is twice blessed. It blesseth him that gives and him that takes. And you know, this beautiful speech is, of course, all about mercy. Mercy is another word for compassion or loving kindness. Mercy is actually derived from Latin, from misericordia, which is a contraction of miseris cordare. That means giving your heart to the wretched, or to give your love to the wretched. And so this pattern appears always in one form.
Such as the mercy of God, right?
Yes, mercy of God.
Yes, he gives his heart to us, the wretched.
Okay, so now to tragedy. I have chosen a work that seems to have absolutely nothing to do with love, which is Julius Caesar. It has no real romantic couple. It has no real love scenes. What it has is an elaborate play on words. Okay, I chosen Julius Caesar. I was not going to choose Antony and Cleopatra. That's too easy, right? So I've chosen Julius Caesar. So, and we were going to have a look at this central scene, which is the famous scene with the mob, which is the friends, Romans, countrymen scene. So this scene is all over the place in what double meanings are concerned, but you need to understand the play on words, especially when they're being uttered by the least likely character, namely Brutus. As a side remark, I must say that's actually pretty interesting that Shakespeare is always going back to Rome. He can never move away from Rome, as if this was the only city in Italy. You know, in Italian, Stephen, and both in Italian and Latin, of course, we don't say it Rome, we say Roma. And Roma, of course, is a perfect anagram of amor. Again, love. So in this speech, this clash between Brutus and Antony, Brutus begins with Romans, countrymen, and lovers. Interesting. This coming from Brutus, that is hardly a passionate lover, and ever that so much so is clear. So why did Shakespeare give him this line? And these guys are debating the fate of Rome, and in Brutus's speech, the word love creeps in 8 times, namely, Romans, countrymen, and lovers. Number 2, to him I say that Brutus' love to Caesar was no less than his. Number 3, not that I loved Caesar less. Number 4, but that I loved Rome more. 5, as Caesar loved me, I weep for him. 6, there is tears for his love. 7, who is here so vile that will not love his country. 8, as I slew my best lover for the good of Rome. And the interesting thing about this speech is that Brutus is clearly saying that Brutus loved Caesar and Caesar loved Brutus, but Brutus killed Caesar. So to Brutus, love is not really love, for hardly one kills those one loves. This is your your Brutus's chopped logic and contradictions from beginning of the play right to the end. And this logic, which is the core of Stoicism, which Brutus was a Stoic, always lets him down. And he stepped here into further contradictions. And of course, you must not forget that Julius Caesar claimed to be the descendant of Venus, goddess of love. So he committed a double violation. Even Brutus's love is dangerous. And when we understand this, we have to laugh when later on, before the final showdown, he says to Cassius, that we may, lovers in peace, lead on our days to age. Because this is a very interesting way of love. On the other hand, you have Antony, a faithful friend of Caesar, who is shocked at the turn of events. His speech starts with friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. He mentions love 6 times, but contrary to Brutus, Antony's love for Caesar is genuine. And the end result, Antony's love for Caesar carries the day, whilst Brutus's offense to love makes him lose everything, even his own life. And even though Brutus and Cassius were better prepared, they have stronger force and even had the better cause. They were fighting for the Republic. Of course, the Republic back then was very different, and the Roman system was quite different from the one we have today. They really knew what they were doing extremely well. So Brutus and Cassius had the better cause. And the freedom fighters, they lose. And the triumvirate triumphs. And this is the hidden subtext of this scene and the general play. For to Shakespeare, love always reigns supreme. Shakespeare doesn't like to see love offended. Then, in another play, which is very worth noticing. I like that play. It's a work that's usually and unfortunately underrated, which is The Two Noble Kinsmen. And this same pattern also appears here. And the plot is as follows. You have 2 heroes, Palamon and Archite, which are the 2 noble kinsmen. And they're rivals for the hand of Emilia, Hippolyta's sister. So they first see Emilia whilst in jail, and they are both smitten with the lass. Archite is set free, but Palamon stays behind in jail. Then the jailer's daughter falls in love with Palamon and sets him free. The 2 kinsmen meet again and fight for the hand of Emilia, and Theseus grants them their trial by combat. But the interesting thing is, before the tournament, before the duel between Archite and Palamon, at length, Archite invokes Mars, the god of war, to grant him victory in the trial against Palamon. However, as Palamon's love for Emilia is greater, and he was the first of the 2 cousins to see her, he invokes not Mars, the god of war, but Venus, the goddess of love. In the end, both gods grant their suitors their respective wishes. Archite indeed triumphs in battle, but Palamon, though defeated, triumphs in love. And so, though Palamon is condemned to death after his duel with Archite, Archite eventually dies by falling off his horse, and Palamon is released and gets the hand of his love, Emilia. So, to Shakespeare, this is a theme that's very appealing to him. Amore vincet omnia. Love conquers all. So, this love pattern is constantly appearing in the entire canon of plays. No exception. Now, we return again to the sonnets, Stephen. The sonnets also have this pattern at play. I here have chosen what I consider the most personal of sonnets, that puts the true core of the artist before the reader. It's also my favorite sonnet. Stephen, sonnet 116, if you please.
Let me not to the marriage of true minds admit impediments. Love is not love which alters when it alteration finds, or bends with the remover to remove. Oh, no, it is an ever-fixed mark that looks on tempests and is never shaken. It is the star to every wandering bark, whose worth's unknown, although his height be taken. Love's not time's fool, though rosy lips and cheeks within his bending sickle's compass come. Love alters naught with his brief hours and weeks, but bears it out even to the edge of doom. If this be error, and upon me proved, I never writ, nor no man ever loved.
Yes, excellent, Stephen. How about that for double meanings? So here, quite explicitly, the author identifies his art with love. He says, I never writ, nor no man ever loved. I never writ, nor no man ever loved. He's putting a condition on this. Then when you think of love's not time's fool and think of love as the author himself, then the whole sonnet becomes thunderous. And I actually noticed that you did it exactly well at that point when you say love's not time's fool. You have to give it an extra stress. Go full on with it. Very, very nice. And you have the usual Renaissance tricks at play here. For you get the same pattern all throughout the canon. In this case, the quarto version, the quarto folio of the sonnets, published 1609, if I'm not mistaken. This sonnet 116. Again, Stephen, this is the only sonnet that has been misnumbered. I call it sonnet 116, but on the quarto is actually numbered 119. It's the only one. This sonnet is before 117 and after 115. It's 116. But again, you have the same problems. Always the same intention of pointing out anything that might give a hint to people that are actually taking all this on. And finally, the last two sonnets of the collection, which stand apart from the entire collection. And by the way, I would like to, I'm pretty sure that everyone has read the book, but Mr. Hanks Whittemore book on the monument, I consider it absolutely seminal. It's an incredible work, and definitely, in my opinion, a work that everyone should read. And I really could not recommend it enough. And
in yes, that, my friend, we are absolutely agreed. And I think that just about every listener who is tuning in would also agree. And thankfully, Hank has given us other versions that are not quite as dense and not quite as voluminous as the original. But I do think if you can get your hands on the original monument, you should. And you're right, Luis, it is probably the most important Oxfordian work ever.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, Stephen. But coming back to these two last sonnets, these sonnets stand apart from the entire collection, and they are about Cupid, the god of love. Yes, of course, Stephen. Sonnet 154, it describes how Cupid's arrows were extinguished by a nymph. Of course, this is a pun on death, for love's fire never goes out. So when the author obsessed with love and the theme of love extinguishes the god of love's fire, this is an allegorical, an allegory, meaning in the last sonnet, hinting that the author is dying. Now, I rest my case with the works. Now I want to go into personal evidence, because we really have a lot of ground to cover. And this personal evidence is probably my favorite section of my work, because this is where philosophy and music really comes to play in the forefront. So we need to start by asking, was De Vere a passionate man? Of course, everyone that has read a biography on De Vere, or several biographies, know that the man was incredibly passionate.
To a fault.
And
he made a lot of terrible decisions based on his heart and his passion as opposed to his mind and his reason.
Yes, absolutely. And this guy was always at the right time in the right place. And what I would also recommend would be for people to read dictionaries on the Shakespearean sexual terms and references. That, by the way, make quite a colorful reading. There are terms there which are absolutely remarkable. He was totally obsessed with sex, with love. There's descriptions of sexual positions. It's very colorful. It's really something else. Of course, De Vere was an extremely passionate man. Then also his love for art, poetry, music, and Italy.
But it's very interesting. Just a little side note, Luis, but it's very interesting that there are so many instances in history of genius being tied to extreme lust. I mean, look at Benjamin Franklin got thrown out of France because he couldn't keep it in his pants. Oh, look, I made a rhyme. He was, Benjamin Franklin was this great genius, this fabulous inventor and fabulous statesman, but he couldn't keep his hands off the young ladies, and they kicked him out and said, don't ever send him back here again. Now, that's a true story. Mozart, ended up dying of syphilis because he couldn't stop sleeping around.
I don't. It was not syphilis.
It was not. Are you
Mozart,
sure?
Yeah, 100%. He. Okay, I don't want to get too much into that. Because,
anyway, what I'm getting at is there are a lot of instances of genius who also sex and lust was their downfall, and it's not uncommon, is what I'm getting at.
No, it has to be like that. Ovid was also a very passionate man. De Vere was always trying to emulate him, even surpass him. He had for Ovid the appreciation we have for Shakespeare. And of course, this passion, Stephen, in order to have to be a genius, you have to have a good brain. And the brain to work, it needs a lot of blood. And the blood is pumped from the heart. Because if you don't have enough irrigation of the old noggin, you're not gonna have the brain oxygenated, and you cannot think that well. So all this pumping of the heart, and with a good head, this is an indication of genius. There's no phlegmatic genius. This is a contradiction in aggetto, a contradiction of terms. Genius is always passionate. Every single one of them. You have Beethoven, you have Puccini, you have Wagner. And in the case of Shakespeare, in this case, De Vere, what do you have? Okay, of course, he's extremely passionate. You have the flamboyant, exuberant, prodigal, patron of the arts. His life is full of music. It has lots of swords. It has lots of wars. It has lots of words. It has lots of whores, women, wine, love, duels, fighting in the streets, trollop starts, spending like a drunken sailor, guilt, betrayal, and finally, redemption. Now, Stephen, this is thug life. This is the thug life required to forge Shakespeare. Then you have the obsession with Italy, the land of love, for it was so even at the time. In Renaissance Italy, we could consider it, because it is, the birthplace of arts, okay, in the 1500s. But let's go to let's say 1300s, more with the higher Renaissance, the beginning. So you have arts, music, poetry, Renaissance, you have elegance, you have fashion. And Shakespeare loved all these. Earlier on in Italy, Petrarch had created the sonnet to express thoughts of love. Even if you look at Edward de Vere's acknowledged Juvenalia, what are the titles of the works? And what do you have? You have Love Thy Choice, Desire, Meeting with Desire. What is desire? Fond desire, fortune and love. Love is a discord, love and wit, so on and so forth. And even in the surviving letters of De Vere, which are mostly all about secular affairs, you have also quite a lot of loves. You have about 16 loves there. So when you consider all this, the pattern is really forming. And now I would like to deconstruct the name, which is, unfortunately, this is probably what everyone is waiting, although the other sections for me is much more interesting. I'm going to start deconstructing the name. Yep, that's right. And it should not take long either. So this name, William Shakespeare, Stephen, this is just a series of puns on the word love, right? I'll explain how. So this will mean, because this is why I find all this subject completely strange and ludicrous, because I'm not a native English speaker. I do my best, but this I will have to teach some basic English to the Brits and the Yanks. So this is how ridiculous this is. So let them all lie back and think of England. Okay, so first we start with William. Will is of course volition, desire, and in Shakespeare, will equates with love. It's the same thing. This is a convertible notion. Will and love. How? Let's just look at a few quotes. In his idle fire, to buy his will, it would not seem too dear. Redeem thy brother by wielding up thy body to my will. Sylvia, what's your will? Proteus, that I may compass yours. Rape of Lucrece, hot burning will of Tarquin. In the sonnets, make but my name thy love, and love that still, and then thou lovest me, for my name is Will. Which is, these are all convertible notions. That's the pun on this sonnet. Make but my name thy love. This explains it all for the first time. Okay, so we have the will. Then follows the IAM. IAM, Stephen, is an anagram of AIM. And bear in mind, Stephen, this is the Renaissance. And AIM would immediately be interpreted as French. Now I do not think I need to translate AIM from French, but I'm going to do it in any case. That's love. Je vous aime. Je t'aime. Okay. It's very strange how these things were missed. Then you have Shakespeare. So we start with shake. Now, Stephen, let's get our thinking caps on. The word shake is, of course, another pun on love. In De Vere's day, a very popular writer was the French François Rabelais, who was quite popular with especially because of his work. It's a very important work in Europe, the work of Gargantua and Pantagruel. Rabelais describes Venus as the goddess of shakers, due naturally to the shaking that occurs during intercourse. A shaker, Stephen, is a person of loose life. And further, in the Shakespearean canon, the word in context can mean love or act of love, like in Venus and Adonis. And I quote, "My boding heart pants, beats, and takes no rest, but like an earthquake shakes thee on my breast." Then, from Julius Caesar, in the Lupercalia, Julius Caesar tells Antony in his speech to touch Calpurnia to shake off her sterile curse. Shake off. In Henry V, we will make your Paris Louvre shake for it, were the mistress court of mighty Europe. Meaning, we will shake the Louvre like a mistress, were she the best of all Europe. Meaning, copulating. The F word. But here it is given.
So
in a double.
To shake is to experience ecstasy, is to feel the physical attributes of orgasm. To quiver or to shake. Your will makes me shake.
You people haven't invented ketchup at the time, so there was not many things to shake. And as a further corroboration that this is a pun on love, Stephen, this is really embarrassing for me, but I need to go there. Mm-hmm. It is shake. Shake is a pun on love. Why? We have in English a very popular word. Oh my God! And the word is shag. Bloody hell!
Right.
You know the word shag, Stephen?
Yes, of course. Yeah. Oh, he shagged her. Oh, I'm going to go shag that dove over there. Yeah, sure.
Or she shagged him.
Yeah, sure.
And it's not, shag is not equivalent with the F word because it cannot be used as a curse. So this word shag, the Brits must be having a... Yes, I'm not going to think about that. Stephen, the Brits are probably having a right good laugh at us discussing the meaning and merit of the word shag. This is how ridiculous this all is. But the word shag, of course, means copulate, to engage in the old copula in and out. And of course, the word shag is derived from shake. I bet that this will cause a lot of surprise. And I wonder, Stephen, how was this missed? Could it be because British gentlemen do no longer have lead in their pencils? But anyway, onwards. Then from Shakespeare, you have the word spear, which is a pun on manhood, the male sexual organ of love, the spear or lance being the weapon of Achilles, Mowbray, Hereford, Adonis, and York. And although I'm not going to do two gentlemen, it should be bore in mind that in two gentlemen, you have two servants, Speed and Lance. This is a pun on Shakespeare as well. In the apocryphal Arden of Faversham, you have Black Will and Shakebag, which is also well noting. But this spear is essentially Shakespeare's sexual spear penetrating the audience. And in English, especially in Old English at circa De Vere's time, the word spear is also used to describe the male line of a family. The female line of the family, on the other hand, is described by the counterpart of spear, which is distaff. And this is the exact use Shakespeare makes of words such as spear, lance, and distaff. Worthy of mention is Gabriel Harvey's mention of the dedication to De Vere, with the famous vultus telab vibrat. Basically, in the dedication, Harvey says to De Vere, "Your eyes flash fire, thy countenance shakes a spear. Who would not swear that Achilles had come to life?" Now, this dedication was written in Latin, and it can be translated in different manners. Vultus is face. It's face, sembiante, volto. Tela can be lance or spear. And vibrat can be vibrate, can be tremble, it can be shake as well. And of course, Oxfordians mostly saw what was convenient for them. And this can be interpreted in several ways, but it's definitely not a reference to Athena. This is in the context I've just mentioned, is the spear as the male heir of the line. Because, you cannot understand this verse of Harvey unless you consider it like that. What exactly does this mean? You have to put it into context. This man is giving a praise to a nobleman. He's going to praise his family line. And basically, even with the name William Shakespeare, I am, Shake, and Speare, they're all puns on the word love. But we still have some ground to cover. I also find it extremely interesting that, Venus in Italian, we say Venere. And the name De Vere, Devere, is almost, I'm not including this as one of the arguments, but one of the main arguments, but I feel I should point it out. The De Vere and Venere are almost a perfect anagram, if not for the N in Venere and the D in De Vere. And De Vere, a master of words, Shakespeare, he would not, this irony would not have escaped him.
Well, it's where we get, Venere is where we get venereal disease, right? They are the diseases of Venus, right? They are connected to her because she, of course, is this goddess of love and loose living, as you point out, right?
Yes. Then you completely, Stephen, and then you have what is probably my favorite argument, which is we need to consider the question: was our author ever called love? As I propose is the meaning of his pseudonym. I would say yes, very often and on a daily basis, because that's how women address men even today, when there is a close, affectionate tie. So a man like De Vere, surrounded by so many lasses, lovers, and wives, was definitely called love very frequently. And that's how his characters address one another. Love this, my love that, my love this. And Shakespeare would have loved this irony, Stephen, because this is Shakespearean irony at its finest. I'm pretty sure, Stephen, that De Vere was never called Pallas Athena. And I don't need to research the book. I'm pretty sure of that. So now we move on into the goddess Venus herself. We're going to talk a little bit about
a quick moment, Luis. If you look at the history of De Vere's life, and as you mentioned, you know that he risks death in order to have his affair with Anne Vavasour, ends up in the Tower and almost dies for it. He ends up fathering an illegitimate child by her. He does have this connection to the Queen, and it's quite obvious that he was one of her favorites for at least a certain period of time. And it's no doubt to any of us that the Queen also referred to herself and was referred to often by courtiers as Venus in many cases. And we also look at another aspect of his life where De Vere was accused and brought up on charges of having sex with young boys. He was basically accused of shaking his spear at just about anything he could get his hands on. In fact, now he was he was found innocent of the charges of sodomy. But nonetheless, he was still accused of that. People felt that it was easy enough to at least besmirch his name and reputation because of what was known as him being a very promiscuous man.
So without a doubt, he was a man that loved too much. Promiscuous, that's really relative, Stephen. We all like the lasses. De Vere also liked his lasses, and he would if he could. That's basically it. And
he would if he could, by his will.
Yes, by his will. And of course, being an Earl, being at the beginning at least, he was quite well off. A nobleman, he was reported as being like sort of handsome, and with his fiery rhetoric. I mean, Stephen, what woman could resist this fiery rhetoric of Shakespeare?
He was a great dancer. He loved music. He was a musician. He had a fine leg, as it was described back then, right? Women were all about men's legs. It's ironic how it's flipped in society now. It's men who are constantly looking at women's legs. But back then it was, if he had a fine leg, then he was a good partner. And I think that sort of equates today to, today we talk about, oh, he's got a good motor. Right? Women look at a man's rear end and they go, oh, he's got a good motor for shaking his spear, as it were.
Okay, I didn't know that one, so I'll bear that in mind for future reference. So, De Vere definitely is quite a character. Definitely had everything that would pronounce him as an extremely, promiscuous or a man full of love, with a lot of love on his mind, as his texts, as his works denote. And then there's always this pattern of love everywhere. And I would like Stephen to talk a little bit about the goddess Venus, because it's really interesting that De Vere is going for Venus, is always about Venus and love, because mythologically, Venus is definitely the most fascinating of all gods and goddesses, and she has always been beloved by all peoples. We're talking about the Sumerians, we're talking about the Phoenicians, the Greeks, even the Spartans, the Romans, the Egyptians, the Hindus, the whole Bali, a lot of them, wherever Venus was present, she was always loved by all strata of society at all times. And this is quite unique. She was adored by both men and women, young and old, and her origin is actually pretty interesting as well. Most fail to understand that Venus was not really born as such. She emanated from the emasculation of Uranus by Kronos, which the myth represents time destroying the endless necessity of space to create. Space is Uranus, time is Kronos. So once Uranus was emasculated, his semen fell into the waters, and Venus, or Aphrodite, was born. So she was born before the gods, Stephen, before Zeus. She is one of the Titans. She's older than Zeus and all the gods. And this is following Hesiod's Theogony, a wonderful, beautiful work. Homer, although Homer puts Aphrodite as the daughter of Zeus and Dione, that's wrong. I'm sorry, but that's wrong. Shakespeare always follows Hesiod, or for the most part, in this case, follows Hesiod, but he really liked his Hesiod. And he's always intent on mocking Homer. Just see Troilus and Cressida. Homer is good, but he's certainly no Shakespeare. Venus is actually the only goddess that does something for those she loves. She saves Aeneas. She saves Jason of Golden Fleece reputation. She even assists Paris. And Venus is always the heroine of every poet. She never directly harms or punishes anyone, but quite the contrary. For if death is necessary, it will not come through her, and it will only come after Venus herself has suffered more and bestowed infinitely more on the hero or heroine. And this would actually be quite appealing to a mind like gentle Shakespeare. Is that not so, Stephen? Now,
yes.
Religious evidence. Christians seem to forget that they're not Jews. Christ broke away from the 10 Commandments and declared solely one, which I quote from John, the Geneva Bible. Quote, "Little children, yet a little while am I with you. You shall seek me, but as I said unto the Jews, whither I go, can you not come? Also to you say I know. A new commandment give I unto you, that ye love one another as I have loved you, that ye also love one another. By this shall all men know that ye are my disciples, if ye have love one to one another." So this is John 13, verses 33 to 35. Same thing with Islam. Islam also puts love as the cornerstone of happiness and harmony, be it between Allah and mankind or betwixt men and women. Also worthy of mention are Hinduism and Buddhism, that Shakespeare certainly knew nothing about, at least directly. Although Hinduism and Buddhism are not religions, but actually ways of life, they are fully rooted in the concept of dharma. Beyond dharma, all thought ceases. Both the Buddha and Sri Krishna, that stand in Buddhism and Hinduism in a somehow comparable position to Christ in Christianity, stated that what they did for dharma and the love for all embodied beings. So you see, Shakespeare, that knew his Bible extremely well, was fully aware of this command. And he was well aware that all religions of the time that he was knowledgeable of had this focus on love. And now, Stephen, I would like to have a look at the first folio dedication, which would be okay. The first folio dedication, Stephen.
Yes.
Okay, so to
the memory of the deceased author, master W. Shakespeare.
Okay, let's go. Yeah, but let's. This is the final coup de grâce. So we're going to look at Ben Jonson's dedication.
Jonson's, not Leonard Diggs.
No, not Leonard Diggs. Johnson.
Okay.
So Johnson was a rather smart bloke that was clearly into all the mystery. And, he loved his puns. His dedication has tricked everyone for the past 400 years. But I think I can give you some light on what is really intended. Ben Jonson, funny character, definitely. So this is a fine dedication. We don't need to go through all of it. I'm not going to read it. So I'm just going to point out the best bits that everyone knows, because there's a lot of text here in this dedication, which is just accessory. So the best bits that everyone knows are the ones that are really the important ones. So you have first the soul of the age. That's good. That's perfect. For Shakespeare, so. And I love it. But this soul of the age, there's no pun here. Then comes my gentle Shakespeare. Certainly, this is an indication that he was in all likelihood a nobleman. For gentle is a nobleman, gentleman, a gentleman, gentle. And gentle is also an adjective of Venus and love. Shakespeare uses the words gentle love 4 times. Then towards the end, Johnson says, look how the father's face lives in his issue. Even so, the race of Shakespeare's mind and manners brightly shines in his well-turned and true-filed lines, in each of which he seems to shake a lance as brandished at the eyes of ignorance. Sweet Swan of Avon, what a sight it were to see thee in our waters yet appear, and make those flights upon the banks of Thames that so did take Eliza and our James. So I'm aware of the shake up a lance as brandished at the eyes of ignorance, but this is just your usual Johnson pun. For he says, seems to shake a lance. Not that he is shaking a lance. Seems, artifice, deception, dissimulation, deceit. Johnson himself says that he is not shaking a lance. It seems that he's shaking. For that's not where Shakespeare's art emanates from. What is most striking here, Stephen, is the sweet Swan of Avon. Well, sweet Swan is in italics, and Avon is not. Sweet, as you well know, is a description of Venus, for no one is sweeter than the goddess of love. That does not apply to Jupiter, Mars, Juno, Athena, etc. Shakespeare uses the words sweet love 21 times. And of course, the swan, from Sweet Swan of Avon, swan is also one of the animals of Venus, because Venus is often depicted on a carriage drawn by swans. The swan in Shakespeare is a symbol of excellence, perfection, and grace. The swan is also a royal symbol of England since the 12th century, and all swans are property of the monarch. Then when you call the author a swan, you are hinting at his royal birth, which De Vere was. So, as for the Avon is a Celtic word I'm given to understand. So the bank, and it means river. So the banks of Thames, that so they take Eliza and our James, have to be the banks of a palace by the Thames where Liz I and James were took. And that is, of course, the palace of Hampton Court, a place where Shakespeare's plays were often performed. Now, Stephen, I want you to look at the first line of this dedication and read to whom it is addressed.
The first line of Johnson's dedication.
To the memory of my
beloved, the author. Mr. William Shakespeare.
Beloved, to the memory of my beloved. You understand, Stephen?
Yes.
He's calling the author his beloved. You don't go about to address people like this. This beloved is just a hint again at love. And Stephen, this is my case. William Shakespeare, the meaning is just a pun on love. We've gone through the sonnets, the plays. There's a lot more that could be said concerning this, but this is definitely the intended meaning. And here I would like to put my QED, my final QED on this deconstruction of the name William Shakespeare.
There's also, and this has been pointed out many times, I know, but it's just for, and again, we'll put these images up on the Patreon page, but it just to point out something in case it's not been referenced in a previous episode for a while, or in case some of the listeners aren't familiar. It's important to point out that it reads to the memory of my beloved, the author, period. There's a small period right after the R in the word author. And then underneath, the subheading is Mr. William Shakespeare. There's a Cowan and a weird little mark there that may be just a ink mark from this copy of the folio. And what he hath left us. And then another period. So I think there's a reason why the period is there after author. And also, yes, Shakespeare is in parentheses in the first line of the dedication.
You know, Stephen, actually, I hadn't noticed this dot after the author. I need to check it because my scan is not that good. I need to check it. Are you sure it is a dot after the author?
It is a dot.
That would be
right
pretty
at
interesting.
The tip of the R, there is a dot.
That's perfect.
I think
Stephen,
he's telling us,
to
the memory of my beloved, the author, period.
Finish.
That's it.
And you see, this is in big, colossal letters, and then Mr. William Shakespeare is in small letters.
Yes.
Look at this. Don't look at that. The other one is nonsense. Is this one you need to consider at the top.
Right.
And basically to that's
draw,
it.
And then, to draw no... I have a hard time with the printer's letters from those days because, like F's are S's and that kind of thing. To draw envy, I believe it is the...
to draw no envy, Shakespeare on thy name, am I thus ample?
To draw no envy, parentheses, Shakespeare, which also, again, Shakespeare is not italicized, so he's definitely giving us a hint here, right? He's saying, Shakespeare's just a name. It's not...
Okay, but Stephen, there's another pun there. And of course, this is just the tip of the iceberg, what I've done here today. Because when you see this, to draw no envy, Shakespeare on thy name, you have envy. Then you have Shakespeare, which in my thesis also means love. So he puts no envy. Envy and love are opposites. You understand?
Mm-hmm.
So this is just irony of Johnson. Putting envy next to Shakespeare, that means love. Finally, even though it's not part of my main thesis, because it's not rooted on the canon, because I always move with the canon, I would like us to have a look at the Shakespeare monument in Westminster. So let's look at the photos I sent you of the Shakespeare,
right.
Shakespeare's monument. Okay, so you have this very beautiful statue. I don't know if anyone has ever tried to deconstruct this, but it's definitely worth looking at it from my point of view and from an engineering point of view, and with understanding of how sculpture works. You have a man pointing at the word. You have on top, he's in a relaxed position. You have the dedication at the top. You have the three faces below the quote. So you have Elizabeth, you have Henry V, and you have Rich III. And the interesting thing about this is how you approach this statue, because when we look at this statue from a picture in a book, they will give you the reading of the verses that are written there in that stone parchment. But if you are standing in front of the statue, you should follow the instructions, because these are all devices. When the man is pointing at the word, if you haven't seen or read the quote from The Tempest, you need to approach the statue and you need to lower your head and look at temples, because you're reading it. This statue is on top of a base. The statue is about 1.70 meters high. The base is about 1 meter, I would say 1 meter, 1 meter, 1 meter 10, 1 meter 20.
It's a
And
beautiful piece of art, and it's very impressive to stand in front of. It's gorgeously carved. It's a wonderful piece.
yeah, I really like it. This is 1740. It's quite good. Okay, when you would in front of the statue, you need to approach it as you approach any piece of plastic art. You need to follow the instructions. So the man is pointing at temples, but if you're looking at it for the first time, you have to approach and look at the word temples. So, and you have to bend down a little bit to read the word. Well, in my case, I needed to bend down because I'm almost 2 meters high.
Mm-hmm.
So when you see the word temples, what you need to do is to follow your usual devices with these plastic arts, which is you have to look for the temples, Stephen. And you have to look for the temples. Now, temples can be architecture or can be the temples at one's head, right, Stephen?
Yes.
Temples at one's head, which you would expect to see the laurel leaf of Shakespeare. Should expect to see the laurel wreath on the head of the most celebrated poet in England, and the wreath is not there, but he's pointing at temples. So, but if you stand there and you lower your head and you look at the temples of Shakespeare, you're going to see definitely two things beside each one of the temples, Stephen. And what you're going to see is that the temples have two words that are coming from the dedication at the back. On the right temple of Shakespeare, you will see the word amor, and on the left temple, you will see the word posuit. And on top of the head, you would see Guglielmo Shakespeare. So you have the words amor and posuit at the side of each of the temples. This inscription reads in Latin, Guglielmo Shakespeare, anno post mortem. What is this? 124. Okay. Guglielmo Shakespeare, anno post mortem, 124, amor publicus posuit, which translated means, well, it can be translated into several ways, but it means William Shakespeare, 124 years after his death, public love put him here. So there's more than meets the eye here. So these words, as I said, amor and posuit, are right beside the temples of Shakespeare. And when you see amor posuit, this means love put him here, or love ordained him, or love gave him to us. As for the Guglielmo Shakespeare, this is not how you write Guglielmo in Latin. In Latin, you would actually write Guglielmus, US at the end, not the O. So, and this is 1740s, of course, they were perfectly fluent in Latin. So they knew perfectly well that this is a mistake. Then this anno post mortem, 124, once the head is into place in this perspective I just told you, the post mortem disappears because the head is covering it. What you see is anno 124, which I grant all the ones that were responsible for this statue were making reference to the famous grainman from Stratford. But when you consider this perspective, you just have Guglielmo Shakespeare. It's still William Shakespeare, which means love. And you have anno 124, which has no meaning whatsoever. And you have amor posuit. So, of course, this being 1740, the 124 years would be the 1616 from the famous grainman. But once everything is put into perspective, there's only this amor. These are the laurels of Shakespeare. And basically, that's it, Stephen. This is my conclusion to the deconstruction of the name William Shakespeare. It's
also missing the E, right? It reads Shakespeare. It's missing the E
this has,
in Shakespeare.
It has to do with the spelling. These these are letters that do not exist. The K does not exist in Latin. So there's a lot of things that are amiss here. And this is my deconstruction of the name William Shakespeare, which is just an elaborate artifice that is simply meant to represent the word love. And when you read the entire canon in this light, I think it will be fairly obvious that indeed it was so. And by the way, these three faces that you see here in this monument, what exactly are they doing here? This is just the invitation to drop your head, because the faces are there. It's like you have to put your head in position to see exactly what is meant as a pun. I included a second photo, Stephen, of the. Do you see it?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
You see what's going on there with the temples?
Yes. Because the photo is taken from looking upward at the sculpture, and
yes.
What is crowning him is that weird dedication plaque above him. And you're right. All you can see, you can't see the entire thing. You can't see all the words.
Yeah, but you can see amor and you can see posuit, exactly where the laurel wreath should have been, right?
Correct.
Stephen.
And again, but at the base, at the pedestal, Shakespeare is spelled correctly with the E. And so but Stephen, there's a reason why the E is missing from the dedication at the top. Because why would you spell it two different ways on the same sculpture?
Stephen, you cannot read too much into this inscription at the base, because it was added, I don't know, in 1960 or 1970. So it's really 230 years after this was sculpted. So this was only added in the 20th century. So this is not doing anything there. Buried at Stratford-on-Avon, this is just the curators of Westminster Abbey or the churchmen there that are about with their tricks. But
one of the things that I really think is interesting about it too is, he's surrounded by all these other monuments, and most of them are, for the most part, to most people, obscure writers.
Yes.
They're not, super famous. In fact, ironically, at his feet on either side, however, you have the one monument to Jane Austen. And then on the other side, it's the Bronte sisters. And I just always found that ironic that at his feet are these like tremendously well-known and iconic female writers that are on either side of his feet. And then surrounding him are these other, mostly fairly obscure men who, yes, they were famous, but not nearly as famous, certainly not as famous as Austen or the Brontes, and certainly not as famous as Shakespeare. So I always found that ironic about the placement.
Yes, so most of these figures are fairly well known, perhaps not today, but you have Southey, was quite a well-famous poet back in 1850s or so. He was a man that ruined his talent by writing too much and writing for money. On the other side, you have Burns, then you have Johnson, this James Thompson. Can't remember who James Thompson is. It has escaped me.
But so that's not Ben Jonson, though. Ben Jonson has a separate...
No, this is Samuel Johnson.
Samuel Johnson, correct.
Yeah.
I mean, he was definitely super famous in the sense of, his day, his context. But as far as like popularly known today... I don't see it as being, or even, I don't know when those were placed. I don't know if those were placed in the 40s or not. And, above him, crowning him are Keats and Shelley. Those make sense, right? Keats specifically makes sense.
But the position of the other statues, Stephen, is not... the Poets' Corner is actually a very small place. They have space limitations, so they have to bungle everything up together.
They did, and it's kind of crappy how crowded it is, quite honestly.
But the statue of Shakespeare is actually quite impressive, and even the stance that Shakespeare is making this is very unusual stance. I don't know the name of this position he's using. I'm pretty sure it has to have a name. With a leg like this. Is this a 4?
His
or
legs
is this
crossed,
an A?
and his he's got his elbows leaning on a couple of volumes of books there, and his chin is resting on his fist.
Because
total side note is right across from him, facing the opposite direction, but a little higher up on the wall too, is one of my favorite sculptures in the entire Westminster Abbey, and it's that of the actor David Garrick, who technically was, the creator of Stratford-on-Avon as the iconic place that it later became. And when you look at his sculpture, it is so garish. It's garish Garrick as he's like coming through the curtain, and there are these nymphs fawning on him, and it's such a wonderful sculpture. It's totally side note, but it's just, I always think of David Garrick looking at Shakespeare and Shakespeare looking at David Garrick.
Yes, very, very interesting. And Stephen, this is a remarkable time in England. They had you like David Garrick. I actually like the statue of Handel, that German guy that came from Germany to England to compose lovely music, even some quite patriotic themes. It was an incredible time in the 1750s. There's a lot of things going on. It was the Enlightenment, and yes, very interesting.
Well, and of course, Luis,
indeed.
A lot of our listeners know that there are plenty who believe and connect the number 1740 to Edward de Vere, and who point to that year being purposeful. The reason the statue of Shakespeare was erected in that year has a purpose, and that there's meaning behind that. And you can find a lot of that information, listeners, if you care to. You can find a lot of that information through the work that Alexander Waugh and others have done. Waugh, of course, has left us now, and he knows the answer now, wherever he is. But that is a very important number to point out in the numeric aspects of things that people have been enjoying studying about the First Folio and other parts of the work.
Yes, I haven't actually seen that one you've just mentioned, but people sometimes see too much into things that are not really there. Important is definitely the number 4. Even this position that Shakespeare has here in this statue is very reminiscent of the number 4. And why is that important? It's because the number 4 in German, and de Vere was in Germany, the number 4 is pronounced vier. Is not pronounced vier. It's not pronounced vier. It's pronounced vier. In German, the V is read as F. And this is how exactly you say the name de Vere. Is the same exact sound. And also, very interesting is that de Vere was born in April. That's the month of Aphrodite, month of Venus. Then Venus and Adonis was also published in April. And that's why we're doing also this today in April, month of April, and on day 4 of April. So we pay homage to the great man that left us an incredible body of work, Stephen. And I hope now this has clarified who Shakespeare really was and what was the intended meaning of his name.
And Luis, if listeners are listening to this episode on the day of its posting, then it is indeed Good Friday of April 2025.
Oh, lovely day. The Good Friday. Yes, also you have a Parsifal from Wagner movement of spears, which is a very interesting pun always on Good Friday. But Stephen, this was definitely what I consider the most interesting deconstruction I have done in the entire work of Shakespeare. I put it as higher than any of the plays. And, I was really proud of both Macbeth and Measure for Measure, which we have covered to some length here in our prior two interviews. But I'm putting this one of the deconstruction of the name De Vere as the most significant and meaningful I have done. And I've spent the last 3.5 years, of course, I have a lot of work and a lot of things to do. But I've spent quite a lot of time thinking about this, and whatever way I look at this cannot be a coincidence. We're talking about probabilities that are absolutely absurd. You cannot have this as a coincidence. You can talk about nonsense stylometrics. I think that in order to talk about stylometrics, people should bear in mind that this is not only linguistics, this is the domain of linguistics, not only of linguistics, but the domain of engineering. And a computer only gives out what is inserted there. And you can never take out anything worthwhile from stylometrics. I didn't do stylometrics. I started by analyzing sound patterns. It's like putting your hand on the Vere's pulse. And his text, his cadence changes a lot whenever he goes on to talk about love. And basically that's it, Stephen. I hope that the listeners have enjoyed this final masterclass. And in the apocryphal words of Cleopatra to Mark Antony, if you have enjoyed it, tell your friends. Masterclass finished.
Well, and I want to share with all of you who are listening, Luis has been gracious enough. Luis is a very private man, by the way, and throughout this process of getting to know him, and now this being the third very long episode and recording with Luis, as I know always will be whenever I book him for the show, he has been kind enough and willing to share an email address where you can write to him if you wish. And the address is Earl@gmail.com. That is Earl@gmail.com. If you wish to reach out to Luis and share your thoughts and comments or questions about this episode, you can do so. I will tell you, and we talked about this at the beginning of the episode, he has, as many of my guests tell me regularly, suffered attacks at the hands of Oxfordians, not the Stratfordians, not the Oxfrods. Go figure. It's not them who come and tell my guests that they're crazy or they're full of it or that they have no place in this or whatever. No, it's always Oxfordians. It's always who should be fellow supporters and who should be part of the fold and who should embrace and support any inquiry and all inquiry into this topic. No, it's always those hypocrites who come on the attack. And so if you're one of those, save it. Just save it. But if you have a legitimate question, if you have a legitimate comment, if you have something you'd like to share with Luis, or you have a question you'd like him to clarify, then feel free to write to him, Italianate.Earl@gmail.com. Luis, as always, thank you so much for taking the time all the way from Portugal to share with us this very enlightening episode. I think one of my greatest takeaways today is the very clear and obvious fact that if this writer were so obsessed as those have said he is about Pallas Athena, why is she only mentioned 4 times in the entire canon, as opposed to Venus, as you pointed out, is so prevalent and so constant and is ever present and everywhere throughout every bit of the work, including, as you pointed out so astutely, the very first word in print that is attributed to the name William Shakespeare is the word Venus. And I think that is incredible piece of enlightenment that I hope everyone will absorb and think about. And as you say, as they go back and read through the poems, the sonnets, the plays, and they look for that ever presence of Venus and love, and they think about what you have shared with us, the meaning of the name, by my will, meaning by my desire, by what it is that
Yes.
I seek, what I want. And that is love, that I will then shake you with my spear through that. I think that's incredible.
Yeah, thank you very much, Stephen. And I would like to thank you for the opportunity of coming here to share a few more lights on Shakespeare and what was actually done back then. I know that we've been rushing here. I really wanted to do this in just one episode, so naturally this information is going to take some time for the listeners to process. But I'm very glad that you've invited me and that I finally managed to bury my foot in the arse of so-called pretend scholarship of European, English, and American people that really should be doing something else because they're not that good in understanding Shakespeare. And not only doing that, but hitting a home run. And doing it my way, Stephen. Cheers for that. And one thing I would like to say before we depart is, this it's very interesting, Stephen. When I deconstructed the name that very first day, it was the following day, Stephen, after deconstructing the name. The following day, Stephen, it seemed like the sun was shining brighter, the air was fresher, the coffee was more tasty, the birds were singing louder. It was a lovely weight off my shoulders. And it was not even part of my initial research, but here you have it. Whoever prefers the Athena and all the other things, fair play. It takes all sorts. It's nothing to do really with me. I've said what I had to say on this matter. And Stephen, to love, to music, to Shakespeare, to the Veer.
Amen, brother.
Thank you, Stephen.
And one thing I just real quick want to share with the listeners, as we mentioned, I will post Luis's PDFs to the Patreon page, so you'll be able to find them there so that you can look at the pieces that he sent me, the stuff that we were looking at, the frontispieces, the front pages. Of course, you can find all those things online yourself as well, but to put them all in one little package, I will put those on the Patreon page. Don't forget to visit our Patreon page. Go to patreon.com/don'tquillthemessenger. patreon.com/don'tquillthemessenger, or you can find the Patreon page just by clicking on the red Patreon button from our homepage at don'tquillthepodcast.com. Don't forget, if you want to reach out to me, you can always do so. The address is contact@don'tquillthepodcast.com. contact@don'tquillthepodcast.com. Thank you for joining us. I always want to thank you all for supporting the program and for being here with us for these wonderful, enlightening episodes. I hope you've enjoyed this one as much as I have. And until next time, keep asking questions.
If you've enjoyed today's episode, please leave a rating and review in your podcast player. For even more, visit our website, don'tquillthepodcast.com. There you can find official merchandise in our shop, as well as a link to our Patreon. This show is made possible by people like you. We hope you'll consider showing your support by becoming a monthly patron, where you'll receive bonus material and tons of exclusive perks. You can also join in the conversation on our Discord and by following us at Don't Quill the Pod on all social media. All of this can be found at don'tquillthepodcast.com, don'tquillthepodcast.com.
Dragon Wagon.